The explosion tore through Naval Station Norfolk at 4:30 a.m., sending alarms screaming across the base as red warning lights bathed Building 7 in an eerie glow. Shore patrol units raced toward the communications center, where black smoke poured from shattered windows, their boots pounding against wet concrete in the pre-dawn darkness. "Suspect located," Petty Officer Martinez's voice crackled through the radio static. "Female, white, mid-30s, found at the scene with electronic device." Charlotte Evans knelt beside the smoking debris, her fingers covered in soot and explosive residue as she carefully examined an encrypted device still warm from the blast. Dressed in a simple black jacket and faded jeans, she looked like any IT contractor working the night shift. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes moved with calculated precision as she analyzed the damage patterns around her. "Ma'am, step away from the device immediately," Martinez shouted, his weapon drawn and trained on her. "Hands where I can see them, now!" Charlotte slowly rose to her feet, still holding the device, her gaze sweeping across the destruction with an accuracy that seemed anything but civilian. "This wasn't the primary target," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "Whoever did this was testing response times and security protocols." But Martinez only saw a suspect at a crime scene with damning evidence in her hands. "You're under arrest for terrorism and sabotage against a United States military installation." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed as they locked around Charlotte's wrists with finality. In exactly 13 minutes, when those encrypted files were finally decrypted, everyone would realize they had just arrested the only person who could save the base from the real attack that was coming. Because sometimes the most dangerous threat isn't the person everyone suspects, but the one they never see coming. The shore patrol station buzzed with activity as Charlotte was escorted through the corridors lined with official portraits and maritime flags. Her hands remained cuffed behind her back, but those watching closely might have noticed how automatically she checked corners and calculated distances to exit points. It was subtle, almost unconscious, the kind of tactical awareness that couldn't be learned from civilian security training. "Process her quickly," Commander Hayes ordered as they reached the holding area. He was a stern man in his 40s with graying temples and the bearing of someone who had earned his authority through years of service. "Base security has been compromised, and we need answers fast." During fingerprinting, Charlotte positioned her hands with precise pressure and exact placement, as if she had done this procedure countless times before in professional settings. The technician, Seaman Rodriguez, noted how she seemed to know the process better than most civilians ever would. "I need to speak with Admiral Peterson," Charlotte said calmly as they led her to the holding cell. Commander Hayes let out a harsh laugh. "Every terrorist wants to talk to the top brass. You'll get your phone call after NCIS finishes their interrogation, assuming you cooperate fully." The holding area filled with personnel who had gathered to catch a glimpse of the suspected terrorist. Shore patrol officers, communications technicians, and duty personnel all whispered among themselves, creating the kind of moral vacuum where assumption replaced investigation and circumstantial evidence became absolute proof. "Hard to believe someone like her could pull off an attack on our base," muttered Chief Petty Officer Williams, though something in his weathered eyes suggested he had seen enough in his 25 years of service to know that appearances could be deceiving. "Don't let the innocent act fool you," replied Petty Officer Martinez. "The evidence doesn't lie. Wrong place, wrong time, with the wrong equipment." But Charlotte wasn't listening to their speculation. Her mind was processing the timeline, the precision of the attack, and the deliberate nature of the evidence placement. Someone wanted her here, in this cell, removed from the equation when the real operation began. 20 minutes after her arrest, the interrogation room door opened to reveal Agent Martinez from NCIS, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with the no-nonsense demeanor of a federal investigator. Beside her stood Lieutenant Commander Brooks, the base's security chief, whose muscular frame and crew cut gave him the appearance of a man who had never backed down from a fight. "Ms. Evans," Agent Martinez began, settling into the metal chair across from Charlotte with a thick file folder. "You're in serious trouble. Terrorism charges carry life sentences, and the evidence against you is overwhelming." Charlotte sat perfectly straight, her cuffed hands resting calmly in her lap. "I understand the charges. I also understand that while you're wasting time interrogating me, whoever planted that device is probably preparing their next move." Lieutenant Commander Brooks leaned forward aggressively. "The only person we found at the scene was you, holding evidence that links you directly to the attack. Care to explain how an IT contractor just happened to be at Building 7 at 4:30 in the morning? I was investigating unusual network activity detected in the base's communications systems, Charlotte replied evenly, the same activity that preceded the explosion by approximately 47 minutes. Agent Martinez raised an eyebrow. And you just decided to investigate this on your own, without notifying base security or following proper protocols? Charlotte's response revealed knowledge that shouldn't have been accessible to any contractor. Building 7 houses backup servers for sublant communications and serves as the primary node for classified submarine traffic routing through Norfolk. An attack on that facility would compromise naval operations across the entire Atlantic fleet. The specificity of her knowledge made both investigators pause. Brooks consulted his notes, frowning. How would a civilian contractor know operational details about sublant communications? Because I helped design the current network architecture, Charlotte answered simply. The interrogation continued for another hour, with each question revealing more disturbing inconsistencies. When shown the encrypted device found in her possession, Charlotte examined the screen with professional interest. This encryption uses RSA 4096 algorithms with custom salt keys, standard Department of Defense protocol, but with modifications only used by naval intelligence cyber units for classified operations. Brooks exchanged glances with Agent Martinez. And how exactly would you know that? I helped write those protocols 3 years ago. The explosive residue on Charlotte's hands and clothing seemed damning, but her knowledge of the specific type raised new questions. That's C4 mixed with aluminum powder, she observed, examining her stained fingers. Military-grade composition, not something available through civilian channels. Whoever used this had access to naval ordnance supplies. As the interrogation progressed, more evidence mounted against Charlotte. The access card found in her jacket pocket worked perfectly with base security systems. Despite supposedly being fake, her fingerprints were on the encrypted device, and surveillance footage showed her in the area 30 minutes before the explosion. The timeline doesn't work in your favor, Agent Martinez pressed. You were seen entering Building 7 with that device. 30 minutes later, the explosion occurs, and you're found holding the same device with explosive residue on your hands. Charlotte remained calm despite the mounting accusations. If I wanted to destroy that communications center, why would I remain at the scene with evidence? Why not trigger the device remotely and establish an alibi elsewhere? Brooks slammed his hand on the table. Maybe because something went wrong with your plan. Maybe the device malfunctioned, or maybe you're working with accomplices who double-crossed you. When asked about her rights, Charlotte recited exact UCMJ Article 31 provisions and naval regulations regarding detention of personnel with security clearances. Her knowledge was precise, detailed, and comprehensive in a way that made both investigators uncomfortable. Contractors don't memorize military law, Brooks muttered. Smart ones do, Charlotte replied, especially those working on classified projects. The real turning point came when base alarms began sounding again. This time, multiple systems across Norfolk were simultaneously compromised. Communications went dark, security cameras disabled themselves, and most critically, someone was accessing the submarine technical databases that contain some of the Navy's most sensitive operational information. This is coordinated, Agent Martinez said, receiving updates through her earpiece. Multiple breach points, systematic penetration of our most secure systems. Charlotte leaned forward, her voice urgent. Check the server logs for Building 12. That's where they'll hit next. The pattern suggests they're moving through the network topology in a specific sequence designed to maximize damage while avoiding detection protocols. Brooks stared at her suspiciously. How could you possibly know that? Because I'm watching someone execute a plan I helped design defenses against 3 years ago. The next hour brought chaos to Norfolk. Every system Charlotte had predicted would be targeted suffered attempted breaches. Her knowledge of the attack sequence was unnervingly accurate, leading to growing suspicion that she was somehow directing the operation from inside the detention facility. She's the mastermind, Commander Hayes declared when he arrived to assess the situation. This coordinated attack matches perfectly with the timeline of her arrest. She's directing it from inside our own facility. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Real-time hacking attempts coincided exactly with Charlotte's detention, as if her arrest had triggered a predetermined sequence of cyber attacks. Base personnel struggled to contain breaches across multiple systems, while Charlotte sat cuffed in an interrogation room, seemingly calm despite the chaos she was accused of orchestrating. "We need to charge her with treason," Brooks insisted. "The attacks are escalating, and our critical systems are failing." Agent Martinez nodded grimly. "The pattern is clear. She plants the initial device to create chaos, gets arrested as planned, then her accomplices execute the main attack while we're focused on the wrong threat." Charlotte's access to a rugged military-grade tablet with encrypted communications and real-time threat assessment capabilities, designed for classified operations requiring secure data transmission in hostile environments, would have seemed suspicious under normal circumstances. But now it appeared to be the smoking gun that proved her guilt. As Commander Hayes prepared to formally charge Charlotte with treason and terrorism, the situation reached its breaking point. Multiple critical systems were failing simultaneously, submarine operational data was being compromised, and the base's defensive capabilities were systematically being dismantled by someone with intimate knowledge of Norfolk's vulnerabilities. "This ends now," Hayes declared, entering the interrogation room with formal charges. "Charlotte Evans, you are hereby charged with treason, terrorism, and conspiracy against the United States of America." But before he could continue, the door burst open with enough force to make everyone in the room jump to attention. Admiral Peterson stood in the doorway, still in civilian clothes but radiating the unmistakable authority of flag rank. His steel-gray hair was disheveled, as if he had been awakened and rushed to the base, but his eyes were sharp and focused as they swept the room. "Release her immediately," Admiral Peterson ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. Lieutenant Commander Brooks started to protest. "Sir, she's our primary suspect in the terrorist attacks. The evidence clearly shows." Admiral Peterson held up a hand, silencing him instantly. His gaze locked onto Charlotte's face, and something profound shifted in his expression. Recognition, relief, and what might have been regret all flickered across his weathered features. "Keep watching, because one detail is about to change everything you think you know about this case." "Stand down," Admiral Peterson said, his voice deadly quiet. "She's Captain Charlotte Evans, Naval Intelligence." The effect was immediate and devastating. The entire room went silent except for the distant sound of alarms still echoing through the base. Agent Martinez's hand moved away from her weapon. Lieutenant Commander Brooks stepped back involuntarily. Shore patrol officers throughout the facility snapped us to attention as word spread through their communications. "That's impossible," Agent Martinez whispered. "Charlotte Evans was listed as killed in action during a classified operation in Syria 3 years ago." Admiral Peterson's expression hardened. Captain Evans was presumed dead after Operation Nightfall went sideways. What actually happened was that she was extracted under deep cover and has been operating under classified assignment ever since. He turned to address the room, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "We sent Captain Evans to investigate suspected security breaches in our cyber warfare division. Intelligence indicated we had a mole with access to our most sensitive submarine technologies." Charlotte remained perfectly still as her true identity was revealed, but those watching closely could see the subtle shift in her posture. The careful civilian act fell away, replaced by the bearing of a career naval officer who had earned her rank through operations that would never appear in any public record. "The explosion at Building 7 was not Captain Evans's work," Admiral Peterson continued. "It was bait, designed to flush out the real threat while framing our own investigator for terrorism." Commander Hayes found his voice, though it came out hoarse with shock. "If Captain Evans is naval intelligence, then who's behind the attacks?" Charlotte spoke for the first time since the Admiral's arrival, her voice now carrying the crisp authority of her actual rank. "Marcus Webb, former naval intelligence cyber warfare specialist, presumed killed in the same Syria operation where I was listed as KIA." The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Admiral Peterson's face went pale. "Webb's been missing for 6 months. Intelligence assumed he was captured or eliminated by hostile forces." "He's been here," Charlotte said quietly, "on this base, tonight, using inside knowledge from our time together in Syria to systematically compromise Norfolk's defenses." She looked directly at Admiral Peterson, her green eyes steady and determined. "Marcus didn't die in Syria, sir. He was turned. Someone got to him before the operation went bad, and he's been selling our intelligence to foreign buyers ever since." The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. If Webb was alive and operating against them, it meant the entire Syria operation had been compromised from the inside. It meant that classified information had been flowing to enemies for 3 years. Most critically, it meant that someone with intimate knowledge of American naval capabilities was currently inside Norfolk's most secure facilities. The real attack isn't what happened to Building 7, Charlotte continued, her voice urgent. That was just Marcus testing response times and drawing attention away from his real objective. He's after the submarine propulsion technologies stored in the deep server vaults, information that could compromise every nuclear submarine in the Atlantic Fleet. Admiral Peterson was already reaching for his secure communication device. How long do we have? Charlotte checked her watch, calculating rapidly. Based on the attack sequence, he needs approximately 47 minutes to penetrate the final security layers. But that assumes our countermeasures are working as designed. And if they're not, then he's probably already inside the vault servers, copying terabytes of classified submarine technology that took decades to develop. The transformation in the room was remarkable. Within minutes, Charlotte went from suspected terrorist to the Navy's best hope of stopping a real security breach. Agent Martinez began uncuffing her, with hands that shook slightly from adrenaline and embarrassment. "Captain Evans," Admiral Peterson said formally, "I apologize for the treatment you've received. We need your expertise to stop Webb before he completes his mission." Charlotte rubbed her wrists where the handcuffs had left marks, then stood with the fluid movement of someone comfortable with command authority. "No apology necessary, sir. The operation required absolute authenticity. If your people hadn't arrested me on suspicion, Webb would have known something was wrong." Brooks stared at her in confusion. "Are you saying you plan to get arrested?" "I planned to be in position when Webb made his move," Charlotte corrected. "Getting arrested for his diversionary attack wasn't ideal, but it kept me on base when he needed me elsewhere." The next few minutes brought rapid coordination as Admiral Peterson assembled his crisis response team. Charlotte's knowledge of Webb's capabilities and likely approach proved invaluable as they traced the ongoing cyber attacks through Norfolk's network infrastructure. "He's using a modified version of the infiltration protocols we developed together in Syria," Charlotte explained, examining real-time network traffic on secure monitors. "Marcus always preferred systematic approaches over brute force attacks. He'll probe each security layer, identify weaknesses, then exploit them in sequence." "Can you stop him?" Admiral Peterson asked. "I designed half the countermeasures he's trying to bypass," Charlotte replied, "but Marcus helped design the other half. This comes down to who learned more from our partnership." The race against time had begun, with Charlotte leading a team of Navy cyber specialists through Norfolk's most secure facilities. Her true expertise was finally being put to its intended use, but the clock was ticking toward a potential intelligence disaster that could compromise American naval superiority for decades. As they moved through corridors lined with classified warning signs and biometric security checkpoints, Charlotte couldn't help but think about Syria, about the mission that had supposedly killed both her and Marcus, about the trust that had been broken and the friendship that had been betrayed for money and foreign allegiances. But those were thoughts for later. Right now, she had a job to do, a base to protect, and a former partner to stop before he disappeared with secrets that could change the balance of naval power across the globe. The hunt for Marcus Webb was about to begin, and Charlotte Evans was finally free to do what she did best: protect American interests against those who would sell them to the highest bidder. The secure elevator descended deep beneath Norfolk Naval Station, past levels that didn't appear on any public blueprints. Charlotte stood beside Admiral Peterson and a hand-picked team of security specialists, her mind focused on the confrontation that awaited them in the server vaults below. "Vault 7 contains our most sensitive submarine propulsion data," Admiral Peterson explained as they descended. "Hull designs, reactor specifications, sonar signatures, and stealth capabilities for every nuclear submarine in the fleet." Charlotte nodded grimly. "Marcus knows that. He also knows exactly how long it takes to copy that data and exactly which files are most valuable to foreign buyers." The elevator stopped at sublevel 4, opening onto a corridor that looked more like a bank vault than a military facility. Steel doors lined both sides, each requiring multiple authentication methods to access. Red warning lights indicated that several vault security systems had been compromised. "He's been busy," Charlotte observed, noting the disabled security cameras and bypassed motion sensors. This level of access required months of preparation. Marcus has been planning this operation since he disappeared. Chief Petty Officer Williams, who had joined the response team, shook his head in disbelief. How does someone penetrate this deep into a secure facility without being detected? By knowing exactly how our security protocols work, Charlotte replied. Marcus helped design some of these systems. He knows their weaknesses because he helped create them. They moved cautiously through the corridor, following a trail of disabled security measures that led deeper into the vault complex. Charlotte's expertise proved invaluable as she identified which systems had been compromised and which remained functional. The pattern suggests he's working alone, she noted, examining bypass techniques at each security checkpoint. These are surgical modifications, not the kind of brute force approaches you'd see from a team operation. Admiral Peterson consulted his watch nervously. How much time before he completes the data transfer? Charlotte calculated rapidly, factoring in file sizes, transfer rates, and Marcus's probable objectives. If he's after the complete submarine technology package, approximately 23 minutes. But if he's selective about the most valuable data, he could be done in 8 minutes. They reached Vault 7 to find its massive steel door standing open, sophisticated locking mechanisms defeated by someone who understood their design intimately. Inside, banks of servers hummed quietly, while data flowed across multiple monitors, but the vault appeared empty. "Where is he?" Brooks whispered, weapon drawn as they entered the secure space. Charlotte studied the active monitoring screens, noting which files were being accessed and copied. "Still here. Marcus never leaves an operation incomplete." A slow clap echoed from behind the server banks, followed by a familiar voice that made Charlotte's blood run cold. "Always the thorough investigator, Charlie. Some things never change." Marcus Webb stepped out from behind the towering computer equipment, and Charlotte saw immediately how 3 years of betrayal and greed had changed her former partner. He was thinner, harder, with the kind of sharp edges that came from living constantly on the run. But his eyes held the same calculating intelligence that had made him such an effective naval intelligence operative. "Hello, Marcus," Charlotte said calmly, though her hand moved instinctively toward her weapon. "You're looking well for someone who's supposed to be dead." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Death has its advantages. No oversight, no regulations, no one questioning your methods or your profit margins. Admiral Peterson stepped forward, his voice heavy with authority and disappointment. "Lieutenant Commander Webb, you're under arrest for treason, espionage, and conspiracy against the United States." "Admiral Peterson," Marcus nodded respectfully, "still trying to save everyone, I see. Still believing that honor and duty matter more than practical realities." He gestured toward the active monitors surrounding them. "Do you know what this information is worth on the international market? Complete submarine propulsion specifications for every nuclear vessel in the American fleet. China would pay $50 million for this data. Russia would pay $75 million, and that's just the opening bid." Charlotte felt a mix of anger and sadness as she looked at what her former partner had become. "We trusted you, Marcus. In Syria, when everything went wrong, we counted on you to have our backs." "And I did," Marcus replied coldly. "I saved myself when it became clear that our mission was a suicide run designed by people who sit safely behind desks while operators die in the field." "Our team died because you sold them out," Charlotte accused, her voice rising. "You gave enemy forces our insertion points, our extraction routes, our communication frequencies. 8 good people died because you wanted money more than you wanted to serve your country." Marcus's expression hardened. 8 people died because naval intelligence sent them into an impossible situation with inadequate support and classified them as expendable assets. I simply chose not to be expendable. The data transfer continued in the background, terabytes of classified information flowing through secure connections to destinations that would compromise American naval superiority for decades. Charlotte could see the progress indicators climbing steadily toward completion. "It's over, Marcus," she said firmly. "Shut down the transfer and surrender. You've taken enough from the Navy. Don't make this worse than it already is." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the server room walls. "Worse? Charlie, this is just the beginning. The submarine data is only part of what I've acquired during my time underground. I have operational schedules, deployment patterns, and communication protocols for half the Atlantic Fleet." Admiral Peterson's face went white. "That information could put thousands of sailors at risk." "That information has already been sold," Marcus confirmed. 3 months ago, to the highest bidders. Some to China, some to Russia, some to private military contractors who don't ask questions about how intelligence was acquired. The betrayal ran deeper than Charlotte had imagined. It wasn't just about money or revenge against the Navy. Marcus had systematically compromised American naval operations for months, selling secrets that would endanger every submarine crew in the Atlantic. "You're talking about treason on a scale that could affect global security," she said, moving slowly closer while he was focused on his monologue. "I'm talking about capitalism," Marcus corrected. "Supply and demand. I supplied information that was in high demand, and I was compensated accordingly." The monitors showed that the data transfer was nearing completion. Within minutes, the most sensitive submarine technologies in the American arsenal would be in the hands of foreign powers. Charlotte realized they were running out of time for negotiation. "The download stops now," Admiral Peterson ordered, signaling to his security team to surround the server area. Marcus reached into his jacket, and every weapon in the room was instantly trained on him. But instead of a gun, he pulled out what appeared to be a dead man's switch, a simple device with a single button under his thumb. "I wouldn't recommend moving any closer," he said calmly. "This little device is connected to explosives placed throughout this server complex. If I release pressure on this button, or if my heart rate drops below a certain threshold, several pounds of C4 will ensure that no one gets this data." Charlotte studied the device, noting its construction and probable capabilities. "You're bluffing. Destroying the servers would eliminate your own exit strategy." "Would it?" Marcus asked. "The data transfer is 97% complete. In 2 minutes, everything valuable will be safely stored on offshore servers beyond American reach. After that, these local copies become expendable." The standoff stretched taut as everyone in the room calculated odds and options. Marcus had positioned himself perfectly, with multiple escape routes and a nuclear option that would destroy evidence while ensuring his own safety. It was exactly the kind of meticulous planning that had made him effective as a naval intelligence operative. But Charlotte knew Marcus better than anyone else in the room. She had worked with him for 3 years, trusted him with her life, and learned his methods and psychology through countless operations. She knew his strengths, his weaknesses, and most importantly, his tells when he was bluffing. "You wouldn't destroy the servers," she said with growing confidence, "because you need proof of what you stole to maintain credibility with future buyers. Dead drops and encrypted files only go so far in the intelligence market. Your reputation depends on being able to verify that you actually accessed and copied the data you claim to have." Marcus's grip on the device tightened slightly, and Charlotte Guinea knew she had guessed correctly. He was trapped between completing his mission and maintaining his future marketability as a source of American intelligence. "Besides," she continued, taking a half step closer, "the explosives would have to be shaped charges placed with surgical precision to destroy the servers without bringing down the entire facility. That level of preparation would have taken weeks of access, and you've only been missing for 6 months. You're gambling with a lot of lives, Charlie," Marcus warned. "I'm gambling on my knowledge of how you operate," Charlotte replied. "You always have an exit strategy, but you never burn bridges you might need later. The servers are your insurance policy, not your weapon." The data transfer indicator reached 99% completion. In less than 60 seconds, Marcus would have everything he came for, and any chance of stopping the intelligence leak would disappear forever. Charlotte made her decision. In a fluid motion, born from years of tactical training, she dove toward the server bank while simultaneously drawing her sidearm. Marcus reacted instantly, his own weapon appearing as if by magic, but Charlotte had anticipated his response. The dead man's switch flew from his hand as they collided, skittering across the floor toward Admiral Peterson's feet. The room erupted in controlled chaos as security personnel moved to secure Marcus, while Charlotte fought to reach the manual shutdown controls for the data transfer. Transfer stopped at 99.4%, Chief Williams reported from the monitoring station. "Most of the submarine data was copied, but we stopped it before the propulsion specifications were fully transmitted." Charlotte pinned Marcus against the server bank, her weapon pressed firmly against his back. Years of anger, betrayal, and loss crystallized into this moment of finally holding him accountable for what he had done to their team, their mission, and their country. "It's over, Marcus," she said quietly. "No more running, no more selling out the people who trusted you." Marcus looked back at her with something that might have been regret. "You always were the idealist, Charlie. Even after Syria, even after everything went wrong, you still believe in the mission." "I believe in protecting the people who serve," Charlotte corrected. Something you forgot how to do. As security personnel secured Marcus and began assessing the extent of the data breach, Charlotte allowed herself a moment to process what had just happened. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the larger implications would take time to fully understand. Admiral Peterson approached her, his expression mixing relief with concern. How much damage did he do? Charlotte examined the transfer logs and accessed file records. Significant, but not catastrophic. He got submarine hull designs and some propulsion data, but the most sensitive reactor specifications and stealth technologies were in the files that didn't complete transmission. What about the information he claimed to have sold over the past 3 months? That's going to require a complete intelligence assessment, Charlotte admitted. If Marcus has been active for 6 months, we need to assume that operational schedules and deployment patterns for multiple vessels have been compromised. The next few hours would bring emergency security briefings, damage assessments, and the beginning of a comprehensive investigation into exactly how much American naval intelligence had been sold to foreign powers. But for now, the immediate crisis was resolved. Marcus Webb sat in restraints, surrounded by Marines who would ensure he never again had the opportunity to betray American interests. The submarine technologies he had tried to steal remained secure, and the Navy's most sensitive secrets were safe from further compromise. Charlotte holstered her weapon and looked around the server vault that had nearly become the site of one of the worst intelligence disasters in American naval history. The mission was complete, but the personal cost of confronting her former partner would take time to process. She had protected her country, served her duty, and honored the memory of the teammates who had died in Syria because of Marcus's betrayal. For now, that would have to be enough. But as Admiral Peterson began coordinating the investigation and Marcus was led away in restraints, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning with the past. The secure conference room at Naval Station Norfolk had become a command center within 3 hours of Marcus Webb's arrest. Maps covered every wall, encrypted communications devices buzzed constantly, and intelligence analysts worked through the night to assess the full scope of the security breach. Charlotte sat at the head of the conference table, no longer the suspected terrorist in handcuffs, but Captain Charlotte Evans, the Navy's foremost expert on cyber warfare and intelligence operations. Her civilian clothes had been replaced with a crisp naval uniform, bearing the insignia of her actual rank, and for the first time in 3 years, she was operating under her real identity. Preliminary damage assessment indicates Webb accessed submarine deployment schedules for the past 18 months, reported Commander Sarah Chen, the base intelligence officer. Patrol routes, maintenance windows, and operational timelines for 12 nuclear submarines. Admiral Peterson studied the reports with growing concern. That information could allow hostile forces to predict submarine positions and potentially compromise stealth operations across the Atlantic. Charlotte examined the data logs on her secure tablet, analyzing patterns in Marcus's access attempts over the past 6 months. He was methodical about it, small extractions spread across multiple systems to avoid triggering security alerts. Classic intelligence gathering technique. How did he maintain access for so long without detection? Asked Lieutenant Commander Brooks, who had shifted from interrogating Charlotte to working alongside her with remarkable adaptability. Inside knowledge, Charlotte replied grimly. Marcus knew exactly which systems to target and how to extract data without leaving obvious traces. He understood our security protocols because he helped design them. The weight of the betrayal was becoming clearer as they traced Marcus's activities through Norfolk's network infrastructure. His access hadn't been limited to submarine data. Communications protocols, personnel records, and operational planning documents had all been compromised to varying degrees. We need to assume that any operation Marcus had knowledge of has been sold to foreign buyers, Admiral Peterson decided. Full security review of all submarine deployments, immediate recall of vessels that might be at risk, and new encryption protocols for all communications. Chief Petty Officer Williams, who had proven invaluable during the crisis response, raised a crucial question. What about the other operators who might still be out there? If Webb was turned during the Syria operation, were there others? Charlotte had been dreading this question since Marcus's arrest. The Syria team consisted of 8 members. 6 were listed as killed in action, including Marcus and myself. 1 survived and completed the mission. 1 was never found. The implications hung heavy in the room. If Marcus had been turned, and Charlotte had survived under deep cover, what had happened to the eighth member of their team. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was our communications specialist, Charlotte continued quietly. Her body was never recovered from the extraction site. Intelligence assumed she was captured and eliminated, but now we have to consider other possibilities. Admiral Peterson leaned forward intently. You think she might have been compromised like Webb? I think we need to verify the status of every person who had access to the intelligence that Marcus has been selling, Charlotte replied carefully. The scope of his knowledge suggests he didn't work alone. The investigation expanded rapidly as Navy intelligence began tracing connections between Marcus's activities and other potentially compromised personnel. Phone records, financial transactions, and travel patterns painted a disturbing picture of a network that extended far beyond one rogue operative. Marcus received payments through 7 different offshore accounts over the past 18 months, Agent Martinez reported, having shifted seamlessly from NCIS investigator to intelligence analyst. Total compensation exceeded $12 million for information sold to Chinese, Russian, and Iranian buyers. Charlotte studied the financial records, noting the timing and amounts of various transactions. These payment schedules correspond to specific submarine deployments that were compromised. He wasn't just selling historical data, he was providing real-time intelligence about active operations. The human cost of Marcus's betrayal was becoming clearer as they cross-referenced his intelligence sales with submarine patrol reports. 3 close encounters with foreign naval vessels, 2 emergency course changes to avoid detection, and 1 submarine that had to abort its mission entirely due to unexpected hostile presence. 63 sailors on the USS Helena had their lives put at risk because Marcus sold their patrol route to Russian intelligence, Admiral Peterson said quietly. They never knew how close they came to being detected and potentially attacked. Charlotte felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. As Marcus's former partner, she understood better than anyone how his mind worked and what capabilities he possessed. The investigation would require her expertise, but it would also force her to relive the betrayal that had shaped the past 3 years of her life. There's something else, she said reluctantly. Marcus mentioned having information about deployment patterns and communication protocols for half the Atlantic Fleet. That level of access requires clearances he shouldn't have possessed after going missing. Commander Chen looked up from her analysis. Are you suggesting he had help from someone still inside the system? I'm suggesting that someone with current access has been feeding him updated information, Charlotte clarified. The data he stole tonight was recent, but his knowledge of our procedures was current as of this week. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus Webb hadn't just been operating as a lone rogue agent selling historical intelligence. He had been receiving ongoing support from someone within the Navy's current command structure. We have a mole, Admiral Peterson stated grimly. Someone currently serving is providing aid to a known traitor. The investigation took on new urgency as they began analyzing personnel with access to the specific information Marcus had been selling. The list was surprisingly short, limited to senior officers and intelligence specialists with the highest security clearances. 43 people had access to all the compromised datasets, Agent Martinez reported, but only 12 have the technical skills to extract and format the information in the way Marcus was receiving it. Charlotte reviewed the list of suspects, recognizing names and faces of colleagues she had worked with for years. The idea that one of them had been supporting Marcus's activities was almost harder to accept than his initial betrayal. We need to be careful about how we proceed, she warned. If our mole realizes we're closing in, they could destroy evidence or warn other compromised assets. This requires a surgical approach. Admiral Peterson nodded in agreement. Captain Evans, I'm placing you in charge of this internal investigation. Your knowledge of Webb's methods and your expertise in intelligence operations make you our best asset for identifying his accomplice. The assignment felt like both vindication and burden. Charlotte had spent 3 years operating under deep cover, her real identity buried beneath layers of classification and secrecy. Now she was being asked to investigate the very institution she had served faithfully, searching for traitors among colleagues who trusted her. I'll need complete access to personnel records, communication logs, and financial data for everyone on the suspect list, she said, and I'll need to conduct interviews without revealing the scope of the investigation. Done, Admiral Peterson agreed. Whatever you need, you have my full authority. The next 18 hours brought a methodical examination of evidence that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. financial anomalies, unexplained travel, and communication patterns that suggested coordination with external contacts. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus Webb himself, facing life imprisonment for treason, agreed to cooperate in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His debriefing revealed details about his network that intelligence analysts had missed. "My contact inside Norfolk uses the code name Phoenix," Marcus revealed during his secured interview. "Female officer, mid-30s, with access to submarine operational planning. We've been working together for 14 months. Charlotte felt her blood run cold. Phoenix had been Lieutenant Sarah Kim's call sign during the Syria operation. The communications specialist who had never been found, who had supposedly died during the mission that destroyed their team. "Sarah Kim is alive," she told Admiral Peterson after reviewing Marcus's statement. "She didn't die in Syria. She was captured, turned, and has been operating inside our own command structure ever since." The revelation transformed the investigation from hunting an unknown mole to tracking down a former teammate who had become an enemy agent. Sarah Kim's personnel record showed a successful naval career following her supposed rescue from Syria, promotions that had given her access to increasingly sensitive information. "She's currently assigned to Atlantic Fleet Communications," Commander Chen reported, "perfect position to access submarine deployment schedules and coordinate with external contacts." Charlotte studied Sarah's recent duty assignments and travel records, noting patterns that suggested clandestine meetings and information exchanges. The woman she had served alongside in Syria, whose supposed death she had mourned, had been actively working against American interests for over 2 years. "Where is she now?" Admiral Peterson asked. "According to duty rosters, Lieutenant Commander Kim is scheduled for night watch at Fleet Communications tonight," Charlotte replied. "She'll have access to real-time submarine positions and emergency communication protocols." The hunt for Phoenix was about to begin, but this confrontation would be different from capturing Marcus Webb. Sarah Kim was an active duty officer with legitimate access to secure facilities. She could destroy evidence, warn other compromised assets, or escape through official channels before they could build a case against her. "We need to take her into custody quietly," Charlotte advised. "If she realizes we're onto her, she could trigger emergency protocols that would compromise every submarine currently at sea." Admiral Peterson assembled a small team of trusted personnel for the operation. Charlotte would lead the approach, using her knowledge of Sarah's psychology and methods to minimize the risk of complications. They had one chance to capture Phoenix before she could cause irreparable damage to fleet operations. The Fleet Communications Center occupied the top 2 floors of Norfolk's most secure building. Access required multiple authentication methods, and the facility was staffed around the clock by personnel with the highest security clearances. It was exactly the kind of environment where a compromised officer could operate with impunity. Charlotte approached the building through official channels, her credentials providing legitimate access to investigate communication security protocols. To outside observers, she was simply conducting a routine inspection of classified procedures. "Lieutenant Commander Kim is at Console 7, reported the duty officer, unaware that he was directing them toward a suspected traitor. "She's monitoring Atlantic Fleet submarine communications for her shift." Charlotte made her way through the communications center, noting the classified information displayed on screens throughout the facility. Real-time submarine positions, emergency frequencies, and operational status reports for dozens of vessels. A treasure trove of intelligence for anyone working with foreign buyers. Sarah Kim sat at her assigned console, looking exactly as Charlotte remembered from their time together in Syria. Same auburn hair pulled back in regulation style, same focused concentration as she monitored communication traffic. But now Charlotte knew that focus was directed toward identifying information that could be sold to the highest bidder. "Hello, Sarah," Charlotte said quietly, approaching from behind. Sarah turned in her chair, and Charlotte saw the exact moment when recognition hit. Years of careful deception fell away, replaced by the sharp alertness of an operative who had been discovered. "Charlie," Sarah said calmly, though her hand moved subtly toward her secure communication device. "I heard you were back from the dead. Congratulations on surviving Syria. Unlike you, I actually did survive," Charlotte replied, "rather than being turned by enemy interrogators and sent back as a sleeper agent." Sarah's smile was cold and calculating. "Is that what you think happened? That I was captured and brainwashed into betraying my country? I think you were given a choice between serving American interests and serving your own financial interests, Charlotte said, and you chose money over duty. The conversation was being monitored by Admiral Peterson and his team, who were positioned throughout the communications center to prevent Sarah's escape. But Charlotte needed more than just an arrest. She needed Sarah to reveal the full extent of her network and the damage she had caused. "You have no idea what really happened in Syria," Sarah continued, her fingers still poised over her communication controls. "What Marcus told you, what the official reports claimed, none of it was the whole truth." Charlotte felt a chill of uncertainty. "What are you talking about?" "The Syria operation wasn't compromised by accident," Sarah revealed. "It was designed to fail from the beginning. American intelligence wanted those weapons shipments to reach their destination. Our team was sent in to provide plausible deniability when the mission went wrong." The implications were staggering. If Sarah was telling the truth, then the Syria operation hadn't been an intelligence failure, but a deliberate sacrifice of American personnel to serve larger strategic objectives. "You're lying," Charlotte said, though doubt was creeping into her voice. "Am I?" Sarah challenged. "Why do you think you were the only one who survived? Why were extraction procedures delayed just long enough for enemy forces to overrun our position? Why was Marcus offered money to abandon the mission while you were left to fight alone?" Charlotte's mind raced through the events of that night 3 years ago. The delayed extraction, the overwhelming enemy response, the way Marcus had disappeared just before the attack began. Details that had never made sense were suddenly fitting together in a pattern she didn't want to believe. "Even if that's true, it doesn't justify what you've done since then," Charlotte said. "Selling submarine schedules, compromising operational security, putting American sailors at risk." Sarah's expression hardened. "I'm evening the score for what they did to our team, for what they did to you. Every piece of intelligence I sell weakens the system that sacrificed 8 good people for political expediency." The twisted logic of revenge and betrayal was exactly what Charlotte had expected from someone who had spent 3 years justifying treason to herself. But it didn't change the fact that Sarah's actions had endangered countless innocent personnel. "It ends tonight," Charlotte said firmly. "No more intelligence sales, no more compromised operations. You're going to stand trial for what you've done." Sarah laughed bitterly. "You still believe in the system, don't you? Even after everything they put you through, you still think justice and honor matter." "I think protecting innocent people matters," Charlotte corrected. "Something you forgot while you were busy getting revenge." The confrontation reached its climax as Sarah made her move toward the emergency communication controls. Charlotte reacted instantly, using her tactical training to prevent Sarah from triggering alerts that could compromise every submarine in the Atlantic. The struggle was brief but intense. 2 former teammates fighting over access to communication systems that controlled the safety of thousands of naval personnel. Charlotte's 3 years of maintaining her skills under deep cover proved decisive as she subdued Sarah without damaging the sensitive equipment surrounding them. "It's over," Charlotte said as security personnel moved in to restrain Sarah. "No more running, no more selling out the people who trusted you." Sarah looked up at her with a mixture of anger and resignation. "This doesn't end anything, Charlie. There are others out there, people who know what really happened in Syria. The system that betrayed us is still in place, and it will sacrifice more teams when it suits their purposes." Charlotte felt the weight of Sarah's words, but she pushed aside doubts about larger conspiracies and focused on the immediate mission. "That's a problem for another day. Right now, we're stopping the intelligence leak and protecting the fleet." The arrest of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, codename Phoenix, marked the end of an intelligence operation that had compromised American submarine security for over a year. Her cooperation, motivated by the prospect of reduced sentencing, revealed the full scope of information that had been sold to foreign buyers. 67 separate intelligence transactions over 14 months, Agent Martinez reported during the post-operation briefing. Submarine schedules, communication protocols, and operational planning sold to Chinese, Russian, and Iranian contacts. Admiral Peterson reviewed the damage assessment with growing concern. "We're looking at a complete restructuring of Atlantic Fleet operations. New schedules, new communication codes, new security protocols for every submarine currently deployed." Charlotte examined the intelligence reports, noting the systematic way Sarah had exploited her access to classified information. She was careful to avoid patterns that would trigger security alerts. Small extractions spread across multiple systems, formatted to look like routine data transfers. The investigation revealed a network of corruption that extended beyond Marcus Webb and Sarah Kim. Financial records led to 3 additional personnel who had provided support or information in exchange for payment. The scope of the betrayal was larger than anyone had initially suspected. Total financial damage exceeds $23 million in compromised operations, Commander Chen calculated. That doesn't include the strategic cost of having submarine positions and capabilities known to foreign navies. Charlotte felt a deep sense of responsibility for the damage her former teammates had caused. Their shared experience in Syria had been twisted into justification for betraying everything they had once sworn to protect. "What about the larger questions Sarah raised?" she asked Admiral Peterson privately. "Her claims about the Syria operation being designed to fail, about sacrificing our team for political objectives." Admiral Peterson was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Those are questions that require investigation at levels far above Norfolk Naval Station. For now, we focus on the damage we can quantify and the security we can restore." It was a diplomatic way of acknowledging that some truths might be too classified or too dangerous to pursue through normal channels. Charlotte understood that her questions about Syria might never receive satisfactory answers. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the long-term implications would take months to fully address. New security protocols, revised operational procedures, and enhanced monitoring systems to prevent future intelligence breaches. The Navy was adapting, as it always did, to protect against threats both external and internal. 3 days after Sarah Kim's arrest, Charlotte stood in Admiral Peterson's office for what she expected to be her final briefing before returning to her classified assignment. Instead, she found herself facing an unexpected offer. "The Navy needs someone to head our new counterintelligence division," Admiral Peterson said. "Someone with your experience in both cyber warfare and human intelligence operations. Someone who understands how insider threats develop and how to prevent them." Charlotte considered the offer carefully. 3 years of deep cover operations had taken their toll, and the confrontation with her former teammates had forced her to confront painful truths about betrayal and loyalty. But the work was important, and her expertise could help prevent future security breaches. "I accept, sir," she said finally. "On one condition: complete authority to investigate personnel at any level when security breaches are suspected." "Granted," Admiral Peterson agreed. "You'll report directly to me with access to any resources necessary to protect fleet security." The new assignment represented both an ending and a beginning. Charlotte's covert identity would remain classified, but she would operate openly as a naval officer working to protect American interests from internal threats. As she prepared to leave Admiral Peterson's office, he handed her a small wooden box containing a medal she had never expected to receive. The Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during the Syria operation that had officially never happened. "This should have been presented 3 years ago," he said quietly, "along with proper recognition for the teammates you lost and the mission you completed alone." Charlotte accepted the medal with mixed emotions. Recognition for Syria came with the knowledge that some of her teammates had survived only to become enemies of everything they had once served. The price of honor sometimes included bearing witness to the dishonor of others. The ceremony was private, attended only by the personnel who had participated in the Norfolk operation. No media, no public recognition, just acknowledgement from colleagues who understood the cost of classified service. Chief Petty Officer Williams, who had proven invaluable during the crisis, was among those present. "Ma'am, if I may," he said after the ceremony, "what you did here, taking down those traitors while protecting our people, that's what real naval service looks like." Charlotte appreciated the sentiment, but she knew the reality was more complex. Real service is making sure this never happens again, Chief. Making sure no one else has to face the choice between money and duty. Lieutenant Commander Brooks, who had transformed from interrogator to ally during the operation, approached with his own perspective. "The way you handled the investigation, using procedure and evidence instead of accusations, that taught us something about how real professionals operate." "Procedures exist for a reason," Charlotte replied. "They protect both the innocent and the guilty until evidence can determine which is which." Agent Martinez added her own observation. "I've seen a lot of intelligence operations, but the way you predicted Marcus Webb's methods and tracked down Sarah Kim, that was exceptional work." Charlotte deflected the praise while acknowledging the teamwork that had made the operation successful. Everyone here contributed expertise that was essential to the outcome. This wasn't a solo operation. The recognition was gratifying, but Charlotte's focus remained on the future. Her new position as head of counterintelligence would require building systems and procedures to prevent the kind of insider threats that Marcus and Sarah had represented. "The work starts tomorrow," she told the assembled group. "New protocols, enhanced monitoring, and training programs to help personnel recognize the warning signs of compromised colleagues." Admiral Peterson concluded the ceremony with official orders that would reshape Charlotte's career. "Captain Charlotte Evans, you are hereby assigned as Director of Naval Counterintelligence Operations, with full authority to investigate and prevent insider threats to fleet security." The title represented recognition of her expertise and trust in her judgment, but it also carried the weight of responsibility for protecting thousands of naval personnel from threats they might never know they faced. As the ceremony concluded and personnel returned to their duties, Charlotte remained in Admiral Peterson's office to discuss the challenges ahead. The Norfolk operation had exposed significant vulnerabilities in naval security, and addressing them would require sustained effort and resources. "The Syria questions you raised," Admiral Peterson said quietly, "they're being investigated through appropriate channels. But that investigation will take time and may never produce public answers." Charlotte nodded, understanding the limitations of pursuing classified matters through official channels. "As long as someone is asking the questions, that's what matters. What matters now is preventing future Marcus Webb's and Sarah Kim's," Admiral Peterson emphasized. "Your new division will have authority to investigate any suspected security breach at any level." The scope of the responsibility was daunting, but Charlotte felt ready for the challenge. 3 years of deep cover operations had prepared her for the complexities of intelligence work, and her recent experience had demonstrated the importance of protecting institutional integrity. "I'll need a team of specialists," she said, already thinking about personnel requirements. "Cybersecurity experts, financial investigators, and behavioral analysts who can identify personnel at risk of compromise." "Whatever you need," Admiral Peterson confirmed. "The Secretary of the Navy has authorized full funding and staffing for your division." Charlotte spent the next hour outlining her vision for the new counterintelligence division: proactive monitoring systems, enhanced background investigation procedures, and support programs for personnel facing financial or personal pressures that could make them vulnerable to recruitment by foreign agents. "Prevention is more effective than prosecution," she explained. "If we can identify and address risk factors before they lead to betrayal, we protect both the institution and the individual." The approach represented lessons learned from studying Marcus and Sarah's paths toward treason. Both had faced circumstances that made them vulnerable to recruitment. An earlier intervention might have prevented their betrayal. As the meeting concluded, Charlotte felt a sense of closure regarding the Norfolk operation and anticipation for the work ahead. The immediate crisis had been resolved, but the larger mission of protecting naval security would continue for years to come. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message that would shape her immediate priorities. "Captain Evans, Pacific Fleet reports possible security breach involving submarine deployment schedules. Your expertise requested for investigation." Charlotte looked at the message, then at Admiral Peterson. The work was already beginning, and there would always be another investigation, another potential threat to assess and neutralize. 48 hours to establish transition procedures for my new division," she said, already calculating timelines and resource requirements. "Then I deploy to Pacific Fleet for what could be our next major case." Admiral Peterson nodded approvingly. "Captain Evans, the Naval Counterintelligence Division is officially operational as of 0800 hours tomorrow." "Good hunting." Charlotte gathered her materials and prepared to leave, but she paused at the door for one final observation. The people who serve with honor deserve protection from those who would betray that service for money. That's what this division will provide. As she walked through the corridors of Norfolk Naval Station, Charlotte reflected on how much had changed in just 4 days. From suspected terrorist to decorated captain, from deep cover operative to division director, the transformation represented both personal vindication and professional opportunity. The challenges ahead would be substantial, but Charlotte felt ready to face them with the knowledge and experience gained from confronting her past and protecting her present. The mission continued, and she was exactly where she belonged, serving her country by protecting those who served alongside her. The secure phone buzzed again with additional details about the Pacific Fleet situation, and Charlotte smiled grimly as she reviewed the preliminary intelligence. The message contained encrypted files that painted a disturbing picture of potential security compromises spanning multiple naval installations across the Pacific Theater. According to the initial reports, submarine deployment schedules for 3 nuclear vessels had been accessed by unauthorized personnel during the past 2 weeks. The pattern was eerily similar to what Marcus Webb and Sarah Kim had executed at Norfolk, suggesting either copycat operations or a coordinated network that extended far beyond the Atlantic Fleet. Charlotte studied the technical analysis attached to the intelligence briefing. Digital forensics indicated that the unauthorized access had occurred during routine maintenance windows when security protocols were temporarily relaxed. Someone with intimate knowledge of naval computer systems had exploited those brief vulnerabilities to extract classified operational data. The scope of the potential breach was staggering. If the Pacific Fleet had been compromised to the same degree as Norfolk, hundreds of submarine personnel could be at risk from foreign intelligence services that now possess detailed knowledge of American naval movements and capabilities. What made the situation even more concerning was the timing. The Pacific Fleet incidents had begun just days after Marcus Webb's arrest at Norfolk, suggesting either remarkable coincidence or evidence that the intelligence network was larger and more sophisticated than anyone had initially suspected. Charlotte's expertise in tracking insider threats would be crucial to determining which possibility represented the truth. She scrolled through personnel files attached to the briefing, noting names and positions of individuals with access to the compromised information. The list included submarine commanders, intelligence analysts, communications specialists, and administrative personnel who processed deployment orders. Any one of them could potentially be feeding information to foreign buyers. The financial implications alone were staggering. Intelligence estimates suggested that complete Pacific Fleet submarine schedules could be worth over $100 million to Chinese or Russian naval intelligence. That kind of money could corrupt even the most dedicated naval officer if they faced the right combination of financial pressure and opportunity. Charlotte's mind was already working through investigation protocols as she prepared for her deployment to Pearl Harbor. The Pacific Fleet situation would require careful coordination with local security personnel who might themselves be suspects in the breach. Trust would have to be earned gradually while maintaining operational security that could prevent further intelligence leaks. The phone displayed another encrypted attachment containing psychological profiles of potential suspects. Charlotte recognized the methodology from her own training in human intelligence operations. Someone was applying sophisticated behavioral analysis to identify naval personnel who might be vulnerable to recruitment by foreign agents. She thought about the lessons learned from confronting Marcus Webb and Sarah Kim at Norfolk. Both had been motivated by complex combinations of financial need, personal grievance, and rationalized betrayal of their service obligations. The Pacific Fleet investigation would require understanding similar psychological factors while working within the constraints of military protocol and legal procedure. The preliminary intelligence also indicated that the Pacific Fleet breaches were more technically sophisticated than what had occurred at Norfolk. Whoever was behind the unauthorized access possessed advanced cyber warfare capabilities and detailed knowledge of naval security systems. This suggested either a highly skilled individual operator or support from a nation-state intelligence service with significant resources. Charlotte reviewed her mental checklist of investigation priorities as the secure phone continued receiving updates from Pacific Fleet intelligence. Identify all personnel with access to compromised information, analyze financial and communication records for suspicious patterns, establish secure channels for coordinating with trusted local personnel, and develop operational plans for confronting suspects without triggering further security breaches. The challenge ahead would test everything she had learned about counterintelligence operations during her years of classified service. But Charlotte felt confident in her abilities and determined to protect the thousands of naval personnel whose lives depended on maintaining operational security for submarine deployments. There was work to do, threats to investigate, and colleagues to protect. The hunt for the next insider threat was about to begin, and Captain Charlotte Evans was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.
The stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.